Sorry about that. Over the last decades, Africa has experienced intense research and policy activities in various sectors, especially in health, in agriculture, in energy, and lately in the climate change and other disasters. And also on a similar note, the continent is home to numerous national and multilateral policies on trade, environment, and food security, among others. And so due to that, the ARIN platform brings together a network of scholars across Africa who have been undertaking research in various fields, including the natural resource management, climate change, agriculture, forestry, water, trade, and gender, and also in cities, just to leverage their knowledge and experiences in helping research and donor organizations to better understand and pursue impact pathways. So the team at ARIN includes top-level researchers and technocrats. And despite these efforts, there is still limited information about what works in various African contexts and the capability needed to translate the available research into impactful outcomes. Furthermore, the extent to which existing policies are interpreted and evaluated in response to the continent needs is widely unknown or poorly documented and underreported. So as a network of scholars and policy makers across Africa, we tend to bridge these gaps through peer learning. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker of today, our very own Dr. Asenath Maobe. So Dr. Asenath is a lecturer and the head of the Department of Accounting and Finance in the School of Business and Economics at Kisii University here in Kenya. Besides, she chairs the Institutional Scientific Ethics Review Committee of the Kisii University. She's a holder of an honorary title of the Best Postdoc Fellow of UNESCO from East China Normal University in 2020. She holds a PhD in finance and MBA in finance, a postgraduate degree in international education policy, leadership and management, and a Bachelor of Mass Accounting of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, ECPAK. Dr. Asenath is an interdisciplinary researcher and is passionate about financial literacy, climate change, gender, and disaster risk management. And the role of the university as a change agent in creating. She's currently involved in Qual case on carbon literacy levels among smallholder farmers in Kenya, in Kisii County, Kenya, universities of Univillage. So today she'll be taking us through the topic, decolonizing research systems in Africa and the lessons that can be drawn from the ARIN decoloniality seminars. So Dr. we are very privileged to have you today. Please feel free to take the floor.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Juliet, for the wonderful introduction. And I guess I'll just go straight to check out my PowerPoint and then we can get started. Okay, Juliet, do you want to check if I have rights to share this? Yes, I do, I think. Okay, well, first of all, I could like to just confirm if you can hear me, and then I can proceed.
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. So, well, I guess for some, probably for most, I guess it should be good afternoon, and for those with different times, I could just say, how are you? So today, just like what Juliet has mentioned, I will be talking about just a segment of the whole decoloniality debate because it's such a wide debate, and it will be more about some of the activities we've done with the Africa Research and Impact Network. And so it will be more of a recap, and I will be focusing on one of the sessions we had that talked about philosophical underpinnings, decoloniality of research methods. And out of this, we have a write-up, a short paper that was actually done by myself, Salome Okoth, who is, I guess, should be here with us, and Dr. Joel Onyango, whom we fondly refer to as the father of the decoloniality debate in our circles of friendship and research. And so, well, today I'll be talking more about what we have done together with them, and of course, as ARIN. So to start with, whenever we talk about research, really we have specific philosophical underpinnings that are kind of anchored in this ontological, epistemological, and even axiological ideologies. And we are going to realize that these paradigms are quite like very different from each other. And we can actually say to each person, the worldview is very different. And if you want to just take a look at one of my favorite singers is called Billy Ocean. He did a song in 1988 and it says, "What is the color of love?" And from this song, it really shows different perspectives about life, but generally about love on this specific context. And well, I'm going to ask if I can just share that song just in a little bit so that we can appreciate it and see how different people have different ways of looking at things. And we will try and relate this to the research that we are talking about. Yeah. How he views or appreciates research and, love. It actually, to him, love is that which is full of bright colors, and it also has a vision of harmony. And okay, well, I'm trying to project this. Okay, just a moment. I want to get the slides up. Okay, so if we go back to Billy Ocean, well, as a writer and singer, he's talking about love. To him, to be of that of bright colors, a vision of harmony, a reality, it's warm and tender. And you're going to realize this kind of description about love would be quite very different from what to another person, what that would mean. And so we are saying then decoloniality in the same way is very fluid. It's a construct that is very multifaceted, fluid, and we really do not have one way of looking at it. And with transformation research methods, then we are saying we want to look at how we can have some kind of, a break from colonial oppression kind of thing and upset some of the historical deep and globally most pervasive structures of power. And you find this power comes, comprises of, power of privilege, patronage, racism, patriarchy, gender bias. We have dominating powers around wealth, inequality, wars, competition, superiority, aggressions, concealed politics. And you see the whole origin is so deeply rooted as to paint a very glimpse way forward when we are talking about sustainability in research methods. And so we've had previous debates on this coloniality, and in some of these debates, we've had actually a discussion. It was an international conference where we were trying to advance the topic around decoloniality of research methods, and it was about how exactly can we enable positive tipping points in a world that is very uncertain. That was a conference that we did in 2021, and it was being undertaken by ARIN, and it was online and then on site right in Australia. And the focus was on philosophical underpinnings and, trying to decolonize research methods for transformation towards sustainability. And on the annex there, you can see a figure that actually captures that particular conference that we had. And so in this conference, we had quite regional presentation. We had international participants also talking about. We also had a feel of, North and South kind of perspectives around the debate on decoloniality and research. And once again, in this forum, there was Joel Onyango, who was the convener, and of course, other members, including myself and John Satella, among the other members. And so, well, some of the discussion that was coming out of this was, whenever we talk about decoloniality, then it sounds like some kind of push and pull. And then we're trying to also look at it, how can, for instance, scholarly activism, how can it help when it comes to these research methods? Or better still, how can we go for methods that open up and broaden out how we want to look at research methods? Do we want to be so much Eurocentric, or we want to break free and work with what works for us, and such kind of, discussions on how we can have or open up spaces for alternatives when it comes to methods. And so one of the speakers there was Andy Starling from University of Sussex. For him, he was arguing for sustainability in methods, that for us to even think about North and South, and for the convergence of both the indigenous and Western knowledge to succeed, we've got to be very intentional and be willing to, or we should have some kind of struggle for humility, some kind of mutualism and cooperation, equality, allowing that it is okay to have plural methods. We should have diversity. We should have caring relations, and we should even have very explicit politics. And talking about caring relations, well, we always joking with some of us who teach that, sometimes students really do not want to know how much you know until they know that you care for them. So does that also apply to us as researchers when we do our research? Do we take a moment to maybe help our researchers or subjects for that matter to also know that, well, we are here doing research, but we also care for you and exactly how you feel. So in his opening statement, Andy recommended some hacking methods to arrive at decoloniality of methods for research sustainability. And some of the methods he mentioned, or the hacking ways, would be like citizen juries, where we allow, people you be the judge, and what would you do in such a case? Open hearings, some consensus hearings, sensitivity analysis, where you look at some of the existing social forces and figure out how exactly do you want to, or which method would you want to use in such a case that could be the most appropriate. And then, of course, you have to be very much aware of the culture changes, the political spaces. Well, looking at all this, you can clearly see whenever we talk about decoloniality, we do not have black and white, but we have lots of nuances that surround that subject. And so then some of the thematic areas that we did focus this time was around how do you explore some of the philosophical underpinnings in sustainability research and in the various contexts that are available. And then, of course, talk about some of the dominant narratives when it comes to research and, and ways of knowledge generation, the epistemology of the whole thing, the theory of knowledge. How do you, what is known and how is it known, such kind of thing. And that is why sometimes we have these kind of conversations where we say, teachers of nowadays, they're using yellow notes. And well, it actually could be, that is how it's been. That is how knowledge has been transferred or used. And so we have lived with that, and we have not wanted to kind of challenge the dominant narratives there. And so then that happens. And also we have, how things have always been done, and trying to break this kind of inertia is quite a challenge. But then I think there has to be some clear agenda or specific intentions to kind of try and decolonize and work with that which works, but then anchor that in the philosophical development of research and practice. And so in the broad meta level, there's a bit of instrumental view of sustainability that actually gets perpetuated, that is still in the conversation on decoloniality. So for instance, if we look at the SDGs 2030, that is the Sustainable Development Goals, the definition for sustainability is that you see in blue, which says meeting human needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to also be able to meet their own needs. So then, well, that is like a very ideal and, well-sounding kind of definition on what sustainability is. However, there is a whole lot of diverse views and understanding of what sustainability could actually mean. And when we shift, let's say from practitioners, move to private sector, go to civil societies, community-based organizations, grassroots kind of organizations in that case, you find that there is no uniform definition to what we call sustainability. And even among the sustainability scientists, you're going to find that they also do not hold one uniform view of what sustainability should be. But then somehow we tend to go back to the same definition, because much as we don't agree with it, we find it such a powerful, dominant definition of what sustainability is. And so we're also saying that when we come to philosophical underpinnings that surround sustainability research, then we truly read constructs, and it is very plural, and there is no way we can continue operating in a silo kind of knowledge. And so researchers are more and more realizing that knowledge should actually be co-produced and co-shared. Like together we create this and use it together also. So in this way, you find that there are some questions that arise from that kind of, view, like does implementing an action, for instance, necessitate knowledge? That's a rhetorical question, does it? It was further noted in the seminars that power commands some form of understanding on what decoloniality is. And so there is really a need for us to depart from the linear kind of model of thinking and look at research methods. For them to be sustainable, there has to be aspects of multidimensionality or multidynamic kind of approach. And so then it was generally agreed that philosophical underpinnings, they will be those which focus that indeed individuals hold their own views, just like the song that I played for you. But then we should also look on how they view the world as opposed to the world that they're actually in. So also aspects of realism that come on board. Also, when we specifically look at the dominant narrative in research methodology, and if you want to look at what Morgenstern says, actually says that decolonizing dominant narratives in research methodologies is a long-term agenda that involves upsetting, undoing dominant Eurocentric research and knowledge production narratives that have actually been deeply rooted in beliefs, cultures, education, scholarship, and research. And so we are saying that it is there has to be some form of tipping point for us to even get out of this, because the way we do our research and the methods that we use, it is embedded in, deep-rooted beliefs, cultures, which will need a lot of, push and pull to break that. And so then this process of breaking from the dominant narratives needs some form of collaboration, some form of inclusive thinking. And then, of course, there has to be aspects of disempowerment for us to decolonize well the dominant narratives. At some point, we will need to add more voice to the table while we exclude some. So some aspects of active exclusion so that you can be able to make some progress there, even in the way we write, in the way we think around research methods, and even in the way that we publish in the academic publishing houses, and even ask ourselves how ready are the publishing houses to receive journal articles that have actually used, let's say, very indigenous methods or raw data for that matter, or some language that is not acceptable. I mean, how willing are they to kind of break these dominant narratives? And the panel also noted during that discussion that, SDG, for instance, it has challenges and needs some form of, it's like the SDGs are some form of dominant narratives and they need some form of emancipation. Yet again, with the same framework that is of SDG, we can actually pick that which works for us and customize it as to be able to work with what we find useful. And so some of the dominant narratives around SDG questions could be like the Sustainable Development Goals, are they decolonized? Okay, who gave us these SDGs and how did they give it to us? Did they have us in mind? And how exactly did they want us to, take up them and, work around them? And then, of course, some other questions will be, what is the relationship between society and the environment? Is society within the environment, or the environment is in the society? Some form of realism around that, which is also reflects back on the ontological perspectives or philosophical underpinnings also in decoloniality. So then again, should we let go of frameworks such as SDG and then probably decolonize radically as to be able to do that which is totally different from what is captured in the SDGs? And so then we had a a session where we had evidence in space, and we had an example from one of the participants who was from Bolivia. And she had a case in point, and this was about gold mines in Bolivia. And so the participants stated that whereas values differ, accepting aspects of plurality and inclusivity in research was a very progressive way in the right direction when it comes to research. Because for them, this was a case study. They say that sometimes we find that research methods, for the most part, is very detached from the local processes, where we lack openness in dealing with the local communities that we're researching on. And then, of course, we do not appreciate the fact that these communities have very different kind of worldviews. And it could be very interesting to ask these participants, which they were doing, how they felt on questions such as, well, up there is a picture of the participants, the gold miners, the miners in Bolivia. And some of the interesting or most reflective, informed, consider them as deep questions is like, where do you see your future as a gold miner? Most of the times we will be dealing with our research participants just to get our data and quickly leave, probably go and write our papers into, probably our thesis and be done with. But we fail to realize that this participants or researchers also, they need to feel some caring relation around it. And just as much as we say research is very scientific, it shouldn't truly remove the social aspects of a person, especially when you're dealing with persons in research. So questions as, where do you see your future as a gold miner? Very important. And then, what challenges are unique to you as a person in the present time? And then, of course, how do you, as a miner, how do you perceive research and gold mining? You see, this kind of participatory kind of approach not only allows for inclusivity in research, but then it makes the participants feel part of the process, which we said we should do the kind of research that does co-production and co-sharing of knowledge. And the key message to the locals is, how do they view minds in the future with the realization that, there is governing practices which could be good or bad when it comes to implementation of probably some of the policies that are in place regarding mining. And well, this whole exercise, which I could view as a decoloniality of sorts, moves away from trying to get information and being detached from your researches to really making them feel like they're in charge of the change that you're about to bring. And then you're also giving them a voice as a community, and you're appreciating their traditions, you are appreciating their knowledge, the language, without imposing any particular theories that you're coming with in this research. And also, the Bolivian case for me is an example that shows how most of the dominant narratives have been imposed by those in power. But I believe that things are changing, and people are realizing that without integrating different voices in sustainability of research methods, then the system cannot work. So then now that is why we need opening up, broadening out, so as to create space for people to start feeling part of the process. And that way, whatever researches that you're doing, then it can start to create some positive impact there. And so then there's need to speak out against anything that brings on board colonial hierarchies that are currently in place. And probably we need to influence how we break loose from this kind of colonial ideologies regarding research. So in a sum, well, everyone agreed that we really need to have research that is transformative, because we want to attain sustainability. So it should be inclusive and transformational, where you accept different worldviews. It should be appreciative of diverse views which aspire for equality in research. Consensus is very key among the different stakeholders. And then, of course, there has to be realization, cognizant of the need for equality and diversity in decoloniality. There's got to be a bottom-up approach to how you look at decoloniality, involve everyone, and in that kind of model. So there is also a need to be active space makers, and that is exactly what you're doing. We're trying to not just keep quiet about this debate on decoloniality, but to keep on, talking about it. And just like I said earlier on, we really do not have a standard model or practice of what we can actually call as, decolonizing research methods, so that we can show you that this is the model and this is how it looks like. But we are also wanting to be in a space where we appreciate others and their ways of knowing. We also, embrace transformative practices. And then, of course, we have had scholarships that, you're just going probably to a community to just collect data and live, and which leaves aspects of, some form of dehumanization, and, people feel like their culture has not been well respected. And because there has been some form of exploitation, negative representation. So then I guess we also realize that there is need for active space makers that I said. And then we also need to have value-based ethical considerations in research, and call out for the citizen juries that you talked about, open hearings, collaborations, accept plural ways of, knowing and appreciating knowledge. And then, of course, well, I read somewhere where I think a researcher was being interviewed, and probably were questions around climate change. And the question was, I think they were asking them, do you appreciate the fact that, if you continue with this kind of pollution, and then it actually means that your life is in danger, and you might actually lose it. And so the leader, or the community leader, was asking, well, we know we are dying, but then could you also tell us why we are living? So that kind of, participant kind of, it's like having a conversation. It's not a research per se that is very scientific, detached with theories and everything. But here you have someone who is also being philosophical, and they're asking you, well, you've told us, and we also know that we are dying, but could you tell us why we are living to start with? Are we living so that we can die, or what exactly is happening? Very interesting observations there. So, well, I guess that brings me to the end of this. And well, Juliet, I hope I kept time, and so back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. for the awesome presentation. I recommend Salome. So I'm going to take this chance to invite Salome to say something about the presentation as well, and the work that you did, and then she'll hand it over to Joy before I open the floor to everyone else. Thank you, and Salome.
Thanks, Juliet. And thanks very much, Asenath, for the very insightful and interesting presentation. So from my side, I think Asenath has tried to summarize a bit of what occurred in that time. But as a people, or let's say in Africa, we are now realizing and we're seeing the importance of decolonizing methods, not only methods in research, but also in policy. because if we look at our space of sustainability, we're seeing the need to decolonize how we do our things, because most of these things are being defined from, let's say, in our research projects, these are being defined by our funders. So how do we move out from that? And it is through these decolonization discussions that we had at ARIN last year, and they're still continuing this year, that we realized the need to first understand the power and dynamics within these discussions, understand where we hold our what is the power that we have and what influences the power that we have. Is it from within Africa, or is it from the global north? So first, we understand this power and how it affects us, and how we should strategically prioritize our research methods and policy discussions, and how does this influence our development strategies, or how does it impact our livelihoods as Africans, especially looking at the marginalized communities. So I think this discussion was timely, and we really need to gear it forward. That's why we're bringing up these conversations more and more. So I'll just pass it on to Joel to add something on that.
Thank you very much, Salome. Just checking if Joel is there. But I think he dropped out for some reason. But the floor is now open to anyone with comments regarding the presentation that we just had. I can see Charles Tunui is raising his hand. Please go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Doc, for that presentation. What I didn't get is especially you expounded much, especially on the decoloniality, and maybe were you able to capture if there are in terms of organically kind of revolution around decolonizing different thinkings, let's say, for instance, the perception on development, and especially you being a gender expert, there was, remember the Beijing gender in development. Are you seeing any, because the work that you are doing is kind of intentional, we are acting with intent that we need to decolonize, but are there processes that are being witnessed happening organically, the way culture changes over time?
Thank you, Charles. I'll just check to see if we have another hand that is up. But if there's no hand, maybe Dr. Asenath, you could answer that as I look out for more questions and comments.
Okay, well, thank you, Charles, for a question. Well, I can only guess that I understood your question, but I guess if you are talking about probably, do we have policies or international kind of concerted efforts towards, breaking some of the dominant narratives, I could actually say yes, especially if you're talking about gender as, you know, one aspect that we can actually say that you see when we talk about decoloniality, then we are talking about, you know, aspects of power, structures of power. And in this case, we are talking about, you know, we have gender bias, we have racism, and, you know, bring it down to our scale. We have issues to do with tribalism and, you know, wars, okay, competition and such kind of, we can actually say we have guidelines or frameworks that support or kind of, you know, help in such kind of instances. But then you're going to also appreciate the fact that whereas we have very clear guides, policies, probably around gender, for instance, I guess the implementation part of it is quite a challenge and remains so. And so just like I'd say, when we talk about decoloniality, we don't want to look at it as an event. We want to look at it as a process that is quite evolving, going on. There are many stakeholders involved in this kind of, you know, trying to break loose. And so we can actually say that, you know, it is a very evolving body of knowledge and interesting, and has many, you know, like opportunities coming out of them. Back to you, Juliet.
Thank you, Dr. I can see Francis Messier has his hand up. Please go ahead, Francis.
Thank you very much. I like the presentation very much. And thank you very much for enlightening me. However, I still have a question regarding decolonization, especially if you talk about decolonizing research methods. We know that when you talk about research methods, all these research methods that we know, we have learned them from the West. The different research methodologies, the different designs, they are all from the West. Now, when it comes to now applying these research methods and, you know, the different research designs that are there, how does one actually decolonize these methods, these designs in the African setting, for example? I'm trying to understand that because, I mean, having done a research methodology at both undergraduate and postgraduate studies, I still feel that the knowledge that I have of different research methods, it's actually knowledge from the West, because these books that we read, these books that are used to teach us research methodology, they are all, you know, written from the West or by Westerners. And so how do we decolonize that when it comes to Africa? And so that's the question that I have. I'm really trying to understand, how do we decolonize these different research methods, especially when we are applying them in a real research setting? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis, and very warm welcome to Pamela. I can see you've just joined us now. So I'll take one more question from the chat from Remy before I can give it to Haran. So Remy says, sorry, I have lost my voice. Thank you, Asenath, for such a fascinating presentation. Experience, what are the conditions that could enable decoloniality of research methods, say at a university level? Haran, please go ahead, and then Dr. Asenath will respond to the three questions.
Yeah, thanks, Juliet, and thank you, Dr. Asenath, for the good presentation. Indeed, this is key with the current situation that is happening with in research arena. And I was trying to look at a different perspective, and I thought this question I'll pose it to you. What are the risks that we may encounter in when we want to decolonize research, given that given that Juliet, is somebody speaking? Can this person be muted? Okay,
yeah, sure.
that's fine. Okay. Given that the system that we have, if we don't allow restriction, especially I'm giving it an example of the African situation, some African countries, if we allow them to do research based on how they're supposed to do it, probably when we are having a collaboration with the northern, with the one of the northern a partner, are you sure that that they will be able to implement what they're supposed to do? Do you foresee it happen? Because I foresee different agendas may come in, and the case of us being able to implement the research will not be able to meet what is supposed to be. And sometimes you find that we are also being driven by donor-driven demand.
Thank you, Aaron. Dr. Asenath, would you like to respond to the two questions?
Sure, thank you, Juliet. Well, I guess let me start from Aaron. Yeah, Aaron asks about, well, how do you see this happening? What are some of the risks that may, come up from this kind of thinking or perspectives around research methods? And then, of course, he asks, then how do we even imagine if collaboration is going to be okay? So, well, one of the things that we have to be very clear in our minds is that, once again, we really do not have a standard model or practice of what decoloniality in research methods should look like. But then we should have like basics to it. And you see, in one of the sessions I said, whenever we talk about sustainability in research methods, the very straight answer we have is that it's not going to be easy. But then we have to have some kind of like hacking methods around it. And this could be something to do with, you have a sit in and talk about it, consensus, okay? Have some kind of sensitivity analysis. If you're talking about collaboration between North and South, sit in with your North partner and tell them, look here, this is what my culture says, okay? And this is what my society is into. So then how do you see that we can actually, or humanly possible, navigate around this kind of issues? Will we be able to undertake this, and what are some of the give and take? Of course, there is always risk whenever we are talking about any activity that we do, be it in collaboration, be it in research. The risk is already there, and we cannot say now we are at that point where we've eliminated risk, but then we can talk about risk mitigation. We can try and reduce the risk to an acceptable level. And so, well, my answer to Aaron could be, well, the risk is there. It is possible that a collaboration may actually be very hard because we are talking about different people with different kind of perspectives. Well, the thing is, there has to be very intentional ways of wanting to have mutual cooperation, some form of equality, some talking, and some kind of consensus building and buy-ins that could actually work. And then to also talk about another question, well, I can't remember from who, but it was asking about whenever we're doing research, we find that most of the methods we use are from the West. And well, that is the truth. If you remember what I talked about, dominant narratives, that's one of the things we have. We have very dominant Eurocentric research ways of knowledge production, and you find that sometimes this kind of interferes with our context-specific scholarship and research. And so then the question is, how can we exactly apply, okay, or localize this? And for me, I like to look at it using the same example that I did give for the Bolivian people. Whenever, let's say, we're dealing with the community, I guess for me, the first thing is to try and unlearn your mental models, the ones you're coming with on board from the Eurocentric research methods, and just learn the people that you will be getting information from. Like, try and sit in with them and realize what are their hopes, aspirations, about life and generally about how they think. Then from there, you can try and kind of adjust and see. If I'm talking about a questionnaire as an instrument to collect data, then this is not going to work. For starters, they will not even be able to answer, even write. Okay, if you find that even writing and reading is a problem, then just dropping a piece of paper for them to fill in, much as it's very scientific, a standard way of getting quantitative data, and very dominant Eurocentric right there, it is not going to work for these people. You are not going to get the right information for your research because the method that you're using does not even belong for those people. So there will need to be some form of paradigm shift where you will have to talk with them to get the answers that you need for your kind of research. And probably if we are talking about gender issues and probably you're talking about, or you're asking women, for instance, because I think someone also asked about how can you exactly do it at university level what are some of the conditions that can enable. Well, I want to give like a generic kind of answer to this. Let's say you are dealing with vulnerable women, and probably some of the questions you're going to ask them have got to do with gender-based violence. I guess it's going to be very hard to, or even psychologically, very bad on them, and probably it might not be a good idea to, well, this is my opinion once again, to have a male researcher asking about maybe a woman, how she was raped, for instance, and such kind of things. It's going to be very hard for this kind of person to open up to you. And so using the context in place and your audience, or your researchers, your participants, you need to study them, have a feel of what works for them, what is the culture of this society. And so then that way, even when you find maybe someone to interview them on your behalf, then they don't feel like they've been, dehumanized during that process of research. Back to you.
Sure, Dr. There was one more question in the chat. Maybe I could read it again. It was from Rainy, and it was asking, from your experience, what are the conditions that would enable decoloniality of research methods, say at a university level? So before you respond to that, I'll allow Emily Bolo to kindly ask her question.
Well, I think I did kind of answer that, like I did a combination of the two. But then I guess to just emphasize on what I already said, well, for me, I like to look at research at university level. It has aspects of publishing and stuff like that. There's some particular conditions where you should publish, not in predatory journals and such kind of thing. And it's one of the dominant narratives that it's really going to be very hard to break loose and say, well, I have my paper here. It's written in my own language, in my own way, raw data or whatever, video or anything, and then probably send it to a publisher who probably doesn't deal with those kind of things. So I guess at a university level, the first thing will be to figure out which publisher, for example, or which audience is willing to have your work. And then once again, go back to what I said, talk about it, consensus building, context, and have that unique belief that we are not dealing with an easy thing, but then you can try and make sense out of it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asenath. So we have two more questions from Emily and from Pamela Gopal. So Emily, kindly go first, and then Pamela will come in next.
Thank you, Dr. Asenath, for the presentation. Just to echo what you have presented, there is a statement that goes, don't let someone else's problems become your problems. And I think for far too long, Africans, we have addressed problems that are not ours to say per se. In as much as African, Sub-Saharan African, and the West, you are suffering the same problems, the impacts come at varying magnitudes. And for a long time, we have allowed the West define to us the condition and terms with which we should address problems that relate to Africa. And I think it's a good starting point that we are becoming aware that we need to have different methodologies that address our problems from the context of Africa. Now, my question regards to a statement you said, without integrating different voices, sustainability research cannot work. So my question, because I believe this relates to decoloniality of research methods, is there a criteria that can be used, or is there criteria that you are using to identify or to draw, to get these different voices? Like, will these voices come from those in the research methods, or will even people from the communities, those with indigenous knowledge, not necessarily from the research community, will they be integrated in this discussion?
Well, I think we lost Emily. Oh, it's me. Hi, Juliet.
Sorry, we seem to have had an interruption from our end. But I was just saying thank you, Emily, for your question, and kindly let's have Dr. Pamela.
Thank you so much for the discussion. Juliet, I'm very sorry, I keep getting the times wrong, so I joined very late. But concerning the discussion that is happening, it's really, really an interesting and subject in terms of research and how Africa's research is acknowledged. As you know, that the policy bridge tank of the African Union Development Agency is working with think tanks, and it's also important to know that Africa doesn't acknowledge its own content. There was a speaker earlier that spoke about our curriculum, as in we always have, Africa doesn't have a curriculum that is, it's now aligned to colonialism. That might be real, but I think our concerns and problems should not be worried about what had happened in the past. I think we need to chart forward, because as we enter the Continental Free Trade Agreement, it does not only allude to countries trading with one another or cross-border trade or people moving. It also has to do with the qualifications and the standards of our people. Whether people can move because a qualification that they have in Nigeria is recognized in Zimbabwe it could be another situation that one needs to address. So research in Africa, I think one needs to think about how it could be, and earlier somebody spoke about the methodology, what approach. We need a common, African approval, if I can say that, a process that has been followed by our universities. Why do some of our African students reaching out to international publishers, to universities? Because it's easier. There's a landscape, there's an ecosystem, that there's no, hurdles, and the platform is available for them to do this easily. And I think it's important for Africa to focus on creating this platform so that when we have African researchers, we know they should be actually proud to be associated with that specific stamp of approval, if I can say it like that, or standards and regulations. So I think going forward, it's really important if we want to address the aspect of Africa having its own narrative. I think it's important then our research also should not then be just benchmarking what's happening on the outside in. For example, we look at European countries and we talk about how innovation have accelerated, but we need to also look from inside out, because even historically, the world does not know Africa from Africa's voice. They know Africa from the external voices. So it's a long route. In fact, I would encourage people to just Google. There's a movie called, I'm trying to think of the name, Amazons, that's being launched by the African School of Economics in Princeton University, on how women were warriors, were part of the war going back in history. So Africa's history is rich, let alone the research that we have accessible to us. And I think it's important for us to see how we can join conversations to be the solution to how we track forward in making our systems, our methodologies, and our processes a common one. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Pamela. I think that's very thought-provoking, and I totally agree with you that as Africa, we need a common kind of method of approval, and just to ease in the habits for our researchers, and also to have, kind of more easy standards of regulation. So thank you very much for that very useful comments. So Dr. Asenath, would you like to respond to the two questions from Emily and the other one?
Well, I think it's just for Emily. And I guess for Emily, at the tail end, she dropped off. I could not get what she was really asking. But I think it was about how best to integrate voices and, and how exactly do we do that? And well, to try and talk about that, well, you see, when we talk about trying to bring, all voices on board, if we are talking about, let's say, a dominant kind of voice, then probably it is not useful for your research. Then we would also be talking about how do you exclude that, active exclusion, so that you can be able to make a progress. So here you would also need some form of judicial judgment and see what really works for me in this context, okay? Which voice do I need? So that even as you do your integration, then you're also doing some form of sieving, okay? Which voices to add to the table, which ones to get off. So that way you can actually try and make some progress. And well, it's not easy, but it's a process, just like what you said. Back to you, Juliet.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asenath. So I'm just going to read a comment once more from Maureen, I guess. I think I lost the comment from the chat, but Maureen Kabasa, would you like to unmute and maybe make your comment even as we draw towards the end of our session today?
Oh, well, okay. If she can't, I think I can read it.
All right, please go ahead, Dr.
So Maureen Kabasa was actually saying, thank you. And she says, being context specific, co-development and inclusivity in every step from development of methods to implementation is very key. Totally agree.
All right, thank you very much for that comment, and thank you very much everyone for such an enriching session. I do not have much to add to it, but just to say then I think it is important to note that decolonizing in this sense now requires that we open up space for free thinking with regard to context, where local knowledge and experiences in research methodologies challenge the often dominant. Is not to say that the existing research are not fit for the purpose, but it means that it is important to appreciate the benefits and limitations of the existing methodologies and articulating them to fit into the local context. So with that being said, I would like to officially close the session. But before that, kindly allow me to invite our convener, Dr. Johannes Atela, to give his final comments.
Thank you, Juliet. I think I need to add much more from the thrilling discussions that have come. Thank you, Dr. Asenath, for the insights. This is very critical because then we begin to reflect on some of the learnings and lessons that emerge from engaging in some of these topical issues. And as ARIN, this is a critical thing that we want to do, that we are able to reflect on the lessons and best ways forward or pathways that we can partake with regards to issues that are really pertinent to the African continent. The topic of decoloniality is very timely for Africa, and not because it's an interesting academic topic or not because it's very great, but because it begins to help Africa and Africans, especially the young researchers, to begin to consolidate and take a position in our knowledge systems so that we are able to take much more active leadership. And this is because the decoloniality agenda emerged from the word coloniality, where we know a lot of the knowledge and new information has for a long time been associated with basically systems from outside Africa. So as African research communities and policy communities, as we begin to talk about these issues, the agenda is about how do we consolidate the Africans' positioning? How do we ensure that the power of Africa in taking leadership in the continent's knowledge system is actually restored? And so when we engage in international partnerships, it is possible really to show that power and be able to engage in a much more equitable perspective. Decoloniality is about equity. It's about voices of different people, different stakeholders, even the most weakest, the most sort of excluded segments of the community. You've been talking about gender, there are a number of social groups which are very pertinent in the continent's knowledge system. But how do we ensure that we sort of strengthen their presence and in the process and in the decisions? So it's a question of freeing up the space. But I also want to warn that in the African context, we need to be clear about decoloniality. And these are questions I've asked in most of the seminars that we had. If we talk about decoloniality, where are we decolonizing to? You know, what does it mean for us? And the other question I've always asked, are we really ready for decoloniality? If, for instance, we were to say that now African scholars, the early career scholars, to lead some of the methodologies, ideas that are expected to be delivered, especially, for instance, in a global platform, how ready are we, you know, with the systems that we have, that we can do this effectively? So it's a question of looking at decoloniality, not just as a North-South issue, but decoloniality, like from where Asenath has actually described it, is decoloniality from even our systems. We are Africans and we live in systems where sometimes we don't even feel like we are part of those systems. It is very easy not to question those particular experiences. It is very easy to perhaps lay blames on other people or external forces. But how do we take our time to look at ourselves and decolonize our own systems and to ensure that we really feel a sense, because it starts from home. Charity begins from home. It doesn't begin from how we perceive this person did this to me, this is the one responsible and all. It begins from home. So the decoloniality is also about decolonizing our own minds, that we have the consciousness as Africans that we need to do things correctly, that we need to work hard and deliver. Many a times I'm not saying Africans are not doing, I've been in international collaborations where sometimes it is very difficult to get the expected kind of quality and outputs, you know, from a lot of our African knowledge systems. The systems are sometimes not supportive. The systems are sometimes, you know, very, you know, not inclusive in many ways. So as we talk about decoloniality, we have to reflect much more deeply and ask ourselves, decoloniality is an interesting debate, but it is decoloniality for what? Have we decolonized our own systems ourselves? Have we talked about our own systems also? Because if we make it, you know, that kind of maybe external kind of competition, whether it's North, South, what, we end up really not, you know, focusing on some of the opportunities that we have as a continent to build a very strong kind of knowledge system and policy issues that can speak to the global North. So I would ask and just encourage, as early career researchers who are actually getting into some of these debates, let's be conscious in our minds. Let's not get into these debates, maybe because we've you know, seen them written somewhere, not because maybe we've seen them on Twitter or anything. Let's get into these debates because we are conscious and we want to really open this up and critique to improve our systems. So this is very critical moving forward. The other point I wanted to make as I stop is that we need to open the debate around decoloniality to begin operationalizing it. Dr. Ari has highlighted a number of areas where the debate, the concept of, you know, the debate around decoloniality applies. You know, in which, you know, spaces can we begin to ground the decoloniality discourse? There are many, you know, whether there are policy spaces, there are many issues of data, gender spaces. So we need to move from the theoretical conceptualization of decoloniality to more practical discussion around decoloniality. We are talking about, you know, issues around, for instance, this continent faces a lot of problems with the data. It's not that data is not there. Data is there, but it is colonized in different ministries, different sectors, but how do we begin to bring the thinking of decoloniality to begin to open up space so that, for instance, data that can help us to make decisions is really freed up, is decolonized, and we're able to have a much more gathered system. The governance systems and all those particular structures, we need to begin taking the decoloniality debate to the practice because it is through the practice that we build evidence. And then we are able then to bring this evidence to the theoretical realm. The philosophical underpinnings are to be supported by these practical experiences, because any science in the 22nd century, which is not answering to the societal challenges, is actually not very, very helpful for Africa. So I want to encourage us that we need to think about operationalizing the decoloniality agenda into our practical aspects, difference. It is not a one big issue. It is that we start there, but now we need to now start bringing evidence on how this decoloniality can help us open up. And finally, I think it would be good with this kind of debates and discussions, which are taking place in different places. We need to begin to build a mass of young, researchers who are able to, engage with the decoloniality discourse. And this is one of the passion that the Africa Research and Impact Network is having, so that it is not a confine of experts, but it is an applied, opened up area where people can begin to see how this apply in their own different contexts. For us to do that, we must begin to bring as many people, as many early career researchers, to begin engaging in this debate. We must create many platforms where this debate is being promoted and is being anchored. It's only through that we will basically use the opportunity of the decoloniality concept to be able to really make our systems as Africa better. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we're going to lose the opportunity. It's going to pass us, because then, we don't really, build on some of the spaces to be able to embed it fully as part of our societal thinkings, as part of our arguments, as part of our sort of knowledge systems in our negotiations in the global platform. So I would really want to encourage that these kind of discussions, we can continue with them. Let's open them up, and let's think about one thing, that as we engage in these discussions as young people, the future is yours, the future of most African governments, the African continent as a whole, is in the hands of the young Africans that I see here. There is no one that will bring that future to you if you don't take it. The way to take it is to begin really ensuring that new ideas, innovations, you really apply them to link to the issues that we want to tackle as a society, but most importantly, that we mobilize a mass of voices, a mass of thought leadership to be able to front Africa's leadership in this particular debate on global knowledge systems and others. I think with those very few remarks, I want to stop there and to say thank you very much, Juliet, for this, and thanks everyone for your time and engaging. Thanks, Daktari, for your time and for taking us through a very interesting and coherent insights from ARIN Decoloniality seminars. Thanks.
Awesome. So much wisdom from our convener. And I think a question to sleep on is, are we really ready for decoloniality, and what does it really mean to us? Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's session. I have been your moderator, Juliet Luoch, but before you go, we would like to see you and just take a virtual selfie with you. So could we kindly turn on our cameras, and our media team will be taking the selfie shortly. Few more minutes. Let's give 1 more minute. All right, so in the count of 3, we're gonna smile. So 1, 2, and 3. Coloniality. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Please stay in touch with us via our social media pages on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. And kindly feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to present your paper or any work that you are currently doing for review, and we'll be happy to schedule you for one of our review sessions. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.